Hi guys, my name's Dav and welcome to D&DGaming. If this is your first time visiting our channel, we provide honest and in-depth game reviews on a wide range of PC games and review them from the perspective of two experienced gamers. We highly recommend you click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our up and coming game reviews. If you find you like this review, remember to give it a thumbs up by hitting that like button. With that said, in for review this time around is third-person exploration and puzzle adventure game Lifeless Planet. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dale.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Lifeless Planet is a 2014 game developed by indie studio Stage 2 Studios and published by Serenity Forge. The game was released in June 2014 for Microsoft Windows and OS X and was ported to the Xbox One in May 2015, Linux in March 2016 and to the PlayStation 4 in May 2016. The game is primarily the product of one developer, David Board. The game follows an astronaut on a trip to another planet that is thought to be filled with life forms. The mission is a failure as the ship is lost in the crash and the planet turns out to be an enormous wasteland, seemingly completely devoid of life. However, among the vast emptiness is a derelict Soviet Union science outpost constructed on the planet. The game follows the protagonist as he explores the planet, figures out why the outpost is now empty and why the planet is devoid of life. As he explores, he occasionally receives hallucinations and flashbacks of his life on Earth. As the protagonist makes his way across the planet in search of answers, it becomes evident that he's not alone. So, Dav, what were your first impressions?
Well, I had no preconceptions going into this game. Have a look at screenshots beforehand and judging by the name, it was pretty obvious it's a planet-based exploration game.
Yeah, just from the name, I figured it was some sort of exploration game on a distant planet, but other than that, I had no idea what this one was going to be about. So what are your general thoughts following your playthrough?
I really quite enjoyed this game. It started out very slow, but the story picked up and pieced together as you go along, and it became quite engaging. It's not without its faults, and I'll go into those shortly.
Well, from the start, I figured this was going to be very story-driven, and it mostly was. I didn't actually expect so much of the platforming elements, and it turns out this is a large part of the gameplay. It also gives the impression early on that it's kind of open world, but it's not really, and exploration is quite limited. It was a fairly average game overall, and most of the fun for me came from jumping around in the low gravity with a jetpack.
So in terms of graphic options, the only graphical options for this are graphics quality and screen resolution. Graphics quality has 6 different options from fastest to fantastic. Fastest being the lowest quality but the smoothest running, and fantastic being the best possible quality but could face some performance issues depending on the specification of the machine you're running it on.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Very basic, limited options in this one. And it's one of those games where it actually comes up as like a splash screen before you go into the main game, and the options are there, and then you can't really access them from the main game once you're in.
So in terms of graphics and graphics performance, we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but the game ran well on my PC with no noticeable graphical issues for me. I ran it on a fantastic setting and it ran really smoothly, didn't have any performance issues. The graphics themselves are not great even for the fact it's an 8-year-old game, but it is an indie title and created in the Unity engine, so it's going to have its limits based on that. I'm not going to judge it too harshly on this point.
Yeah, I also played on the highest settings, which was the interestingly named Fantastic. Even on the highest settings, the graphics are very basic and really not great at all, to be honest. Some of the distant shots, such as with the sun setting in the background, look nice at times. But really not great when you're close up on objects. I also noticed a lot of popping in of distant objects, even on the highest settings.
So how did you find the player controls?
Well, actually, I found them to be quite janky controls and really not very precise, certainly on mouse and keyboard, and this is a shame and kind of annoying as there's so many platforming elements to the game. It feels like the camera gets pulled around when looking manually and moving the character at the same time, as the camera doesn't move fully independently of the character, although you can at least toggle this auto-centering in the options. It seems to me like it was designed mostly for controllers, to be honest.
So the controls are basic, which is fine, but I did find them, as Dale did, quite clunky. The movement of the astronaut is not particularly fluid with a mouse and keyboard, and as Dale's pointed out, it's probably better with a controller. similar. In terms of controls themselves, with a mouse and keyboard, it's simply WASD to move around, or you can use the mouse or a combination of both. It's space to jump and a few inventory and interaction keys, but that's about it really on the controls front. They're very simple. Key rebinding is available from the controls menu, which pops up first before entering the game, as Dale pointed out earlier with the graphics. So in terms of the game's story, the game revolves around an astronaut sent to a planet that is thought to be colonized with life forms. The spacecraft crash lands and the other 2 astronauts are killed. The planet turns out to be a wasteland with only some derelict Soviet Union outposts and appears to be devoid of life. The story then follows the astronaut as he explores the planet, discovering clues as to how and why the Soviet outposts are abandoned and why the planet is no longer colonized. And in terms of the game mechanics, these are very simple. You walk, run, jump around through the different biomes on the planet, searching for items such as documents and filed entries left by the previous inhabitants of the planet. You can view them through a tablet computer, which automatically translates them from Russian into your chosen language setting. The information you find begins to piece together the story of the former inhabitants. You sometimes come across containers that boost your jump and allow you to jump further to continue exploring. Occasionally you begin to run low on oxygen, and more can be found in these special oxygen units. As you make discoveries and realise that you're not alone on the planet, there are puzzles to solve to progress, many of which use the environment of the planet to solve. So in terms of UI, there's simply no UI in the game. It has a simple menu that can be accessed to review documents and collected items. It's all very basic.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. In terms of the sound and music, well, I thought it was very atmospheric music and slightly ominous sounding in places, actually.
Несмотря на нерешительность наших ученых,
I thought the voice acting was good. There's not many voice actors in the game, but those that were all sounded good to me.
I understand that even at twice the speed of light, your journey will take 15 years.
That's right. We'll be traveling so fast, our spacecraft will arrive at the planet before the transmission of this interview does.
Yeah, so I thought the music was very good as well, actually. Very orchestral and works very well with the game. It's not always there and only coming in on particular sections or during particular events, but yeah, I found it really good. I agree with Dale on the voice acting. Yeah, there's not many voice actors, but yeah, they all sounded pretty good. So in terms of bugs and glitches, I did get stuck in the environment at one point.
I didn't have any major bugs, but the camera did seem to like glitching through objects a lot. I noticed when you were close to like the edge of a cliff or something, it would quite easily just clip through it, which was a shame.
So to sum up things I liked about the game was slow to start off with, but the story really begins to pick up, and I actually found it was a really interesting backstory. The way the story unfolds, piecing together the information as you go along, is quite gripping in the way you follow the survivor.
The following of Survivor keeps you gripped. Grippy.
The way the story unfolds, piecing together the information as you go along, is really gripping, and there really is a want to understand the story. What?
And one does want to understand.
And wanting to understand the story really keeps the player gripped. That'll do. I like the mix of biomes on the planet, from wide open expanses to volcanic areas and caves. There are quite a few different biomes as you work your way across the planet. There were some interesting puzzles in the game that used the environment to its full potential, although they were a bit too easy at times. I like the music. It was really fitting and appropriate for the game. It really helped with the suspense as well.
In terms of things I liked about the game, well, I liked the story, which was quite gripping, and I genuinely wanted to find out how it was going to end. I didn't think it was a great ending, a bit of a letdown, but I still enjoyed the story overall. The jetpack was just fun to use, and although the controls were annoying and imprecise at times, I did enjoy most of the platforming elements. I thought the music was well done and suited the game and environment that they're trying to portray. I thought they did a good job of capturing the atmosphere of a desolate planet and the feeling of being completely lost and alone.
So in terms of things I didn't like about the game, the controls are my main gripe with this. They're very clunky and it can be frustrating at points in the game where you have to walk across narrow areas or land on small platforms. There's a lack of survival aspect to the game. There was really not much of a survival element in the game, which I thought was a shame. They could have made more of this. It did get quite repetitive in its gameplay as there wasn't a huge amount to do.
Yeah, in terms of things I didn't like, I did feel it was too scripted at times. For example, when you see a flashing oxygen supply in the distance, cue the game telling you you're running low on oxygen. Oh, what a surprise. In reality, you could take as long as you like in the previous section between the oxygen top-ups, and you won't run low until you hit that particular trigger in the game. The collectibles are pointless. For example, the plants, which I was looking for earlier in the game, and then I got the feeling there was just going to be no actual reason for collecting these, and I was right. Utterly pointless and clearly just put in to extend the playtime. Considering that vast amounts of the game are platforming, the controls are not very precise, as we mentioned, and that's just not good at all. There is lots of running through barren, mostly featureless landscapes with really not much to do or look at, unfortunately. So do you think there are any missed opportunities, Dev?
Well, I think they could have made more of the survival element in the game, as I mentioned in my bad points. At the beginning, you have to get to the oxygen unit quickly before you run out. At this point, I thought this was what the game was going to be like all the way through. A real struggle for survival in a hostile environment. Perfect. Unfortunately, this only happened a handful of times in the game, and when it did, there was always an oxygen unit just ahead, as Dale pointed out, just as you started to run out of oxygen. So this kind of made it a pointless feature to have in the game. They could have made much more of this in terms of its survival aspect.
Yeah, I thought they could have filled out some of the areas to make it a little more open world rather than finding yourself walking off to try and explore and then just hitting an invisible wall and having to backtrack on yourself. They also could have expanded on the collectibles a lot, which would have also added some replayability to it.
So in terms of scores, what do you think on this one, Dale?
I found this one to be mostly enjoyable, but really quite average for the most part. I like the atmosphere that they created, and the story kept me interested, but the dodgy controls and very scripted feel to the game knocked some points off the score. It was a short enough game and had some good elements to it, and so I'd say it is worth a play if you pick it up cheap or even for free, and so from me it's a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, so for me, I did enjoy the game, however basic it is in its gameplay. I think my enjoyment, though, largely hinges on the story and the way it grips the player. It's the main driver for keeping you gripped as you find yourself wanting to understand more about what's happened on the planet. Aside from this, the gameplay is basic, the graphics are low quality, the controls do definitely leave something to be desired, and the survival aspect, which I got the impression of at the start, that I thought was going to be there throughout the game, just wasn't. So these things all brought the score down for me, unfortunately. However, I did enjoy the game aside from these, so on balance, I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.